Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. Okay, my guest today is a production sound mixer who has worked on television, documentary, commercial, and new media. He's based out of Los Angeles in the Southern California area. Please welcome Paul Buscemi.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay, Paul, when you're working as a production sound mixer on set, I know you have a bag and a cart, so let's start with your audio bag. So just give us a rundown of your mixer, your recorder, preferred mics, and everything in between.
Absolutely, yeah. So I have a 633, it's in an Orca bag. I believe it's the OR30 bag. And I have Electrosonics wireless in there, SMV and SMQV transmitters, and 411 receivers, and SRB receivers. CAS 11 lav microphones is my main go-to mic. I have a few other different ones, but I love the CAS 11s. And then I have a Comtech, the small 216 transmitter in that bag. And I have a Electrosonics 400A transmitter for hops to camera if I'm going to do that route. My camera hops are Electrosonics LR receivers. Got a couple of those. And that's kind of my bag in a nutshell. I've got VDB and K-Tech boom poles. My go-to shotgun mics are Shep CMIT. I also have MKH50 and the tried and true 416, like if I'm going to go to Antarctica or something. That's my bag set in a nutshell. And then my cart is sort of a hybrid cart that I've been working on for a little over a year, almost 2 years now. I started building a Zuka-based cart. I wanted something really small and portable and would have a very small footprint on set. And I wanted to do this sort of hybrid idea I had where my larger bag, which has a 688 in it, would be the sort of central component of the cart. And the cart would break apart in three ways. It would be a regular sound cart with an antenna mast and all that kind of stuff. And then you could pull off the top half of the cart and it would become a tabletop. And with that tabletop, you would have that bag with the 688, and you would have the CL12 fader panel, and you would have all your wireless and your power and antenna distro. And so if you're at a location where you couldn't bring the cart inside or you had to go up a bunch of stairs, you could actually pop off that whole unit, take it up there with you. And then the final disassembly, the part 3, would be where you could pull off the bag and, run around as an E&G mixer, but still have all the same wireless, the same recorder, the same power and antenna distro, all built in to that thing that I call, or like to call, the central component. And that bag is really no longer a bag anymore. I switched to Daniel Powell's mixer cage. Daniel Powell's created these great mixer cages. He's a LA sound mixer and a good friend. And I tried out his mixer cage very early on. And then I recently updated it with some new features he's added to them. And so inside that is what would be kind of like a traditional larger bag setup and a little more. So I have my 688, I have my Electrosonics receivers, I have a Comtech 75 base station, which is the smaller black one. I have PSC antenna distro, the RF Mini Multi or the RF Multi Mini. I'm not sure if I'm getting that name right. And I have also their powered distro, which is the Power Star Mini, which allows me to run that whole unit off of AC if I want. So when it's on the cart, it's definitely running off AC first, and then also a battery backup. And I have old school NP1 IDX batteries for that setup. And that's that rig in a nutshell.
All right. Well, what kind of time code boxes do you like to use?
Timecode, I have Denicky and I have Tentacle Sync. I've got two of the first version of the Tentacle Sync. Love those. They're very light. Of course, camera department loves those. And then I have Denicky as well. I have the JB1, I believe it's called. It's the newer, or their newest, smallest. It's the same size as the Tentacle. It's very light, but it has a BNC connection and it has a little screen on it. And that's handy. And then if I have to go beyond that, I have the old school Denicky SBTs. Camera guys love those. Not too often I have to go to those, but they're there if I need them.
Okay. Now, for some of our listeners who don't know much about the mixer cage, kind of talk to us a little bit more about that.
This is a great idea that Daniel had. He basically is using 80-20 material to build a box for your mixer. And then he has ABS panels on the top and bottom. So it's very light and it's open on every side. He's created some things now where you can cover the sides, but they're just all attached with Velcro. So you can pull them off very easily. So it makes it easy in the sense that you can see everything in there and you can get at everything from any side, whereas a bag, sometimes you're a little more limited and it gets dark in there as well because it's surrounded by all this material. It, of course, is different than a bag. It's not really padded on the sides. It's, more square corners, but it's definitely set up to be worn as a bag. You can wear it with a harness or you can wear it with a strap over your shoulder. And I love it because it is sort of that hybrid in between a bag and in between sort of a rack mount, although it's not rack mount size, system to organize all your stuff. And I've had my stuff organized in there a couple different ways now. I like the way I have it set up now, and I've just really, really enjoyed having that for my larger rig. It's really, for me and for my work, it's just versatile. It's great to be able to have that as a bag unit and then also have it on my cart. And it's very quick and fast to switch, from one mode to the other since it's in that rig.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the projects you've worked on. I saw that you had done something for the Travel Channel called Flipping Ships. So tell us a little bit about that project.
Yeah, that was a fun show. It didn't last more than one season, sadly. It was a little horribly placed. It was a Discovery show. It needed to be on Discovery, but at the time they were trying to get different types of shows on Animal Planet. So it was actually on Animal Planet, oddly enough, after Treehouse Masters. I think originally I heard that they were trying to find another show that would be a companion show to play after Treehouse Masters. And by the time the show got on the air, I think Animal Planet and Discovery were getting a lot of complaints that they didn't have animal shows on. So that was a hurdle the show had to overcome. And then I don't think it was an inexpensive show because it was a boat building show. But it was a lot of fun. I worked the better part of 6 months in Greenville, South Carolina on that show. The host of the show was Edwin McCain, and he is a singer and a musician. He had a very big hit in the 90s, I'll Be, that I guess was a really popular wedding song and still is, I guess. But he also had this idea of customizing boats, like crazy customizations, like, hot rods almost. And so every episode he had someone who wanted a specialized boat. And so we built just all these crazy boats for that show. He had like a camper shell on one boat. He built a Chinese junk boat for another person. And he restored an old 50s sort of like pleasure boat, ski boat. And it was just a lot of fun, real lot of fun. And a lot of great challenges as well. We had a cast of 6 people. We had myself and another mixer working on the show, Todd Rexon, and we would just sort of film them in their shop, and then maybe a few people would break off, and Todd would go with them and a camera or two, and then they go off and do something somewhere else. And so we had to have both bags sort of universally set up to receive all the cast. It was just a real lot of fun. It was a great show in the sense that I didn't have to stay there for 6 months straight because Edwin still performs a lot. And so we would go there for 2 or 3 weeks and shoot some stuff. And then he would have to go off and tour a little and then would come back in a week or 2 weeks. And So it was nice. I was able to come and go and not be away from the family for that whole time. It was ideal in that regard, boy.
Nice. Well, do you remember the miking setup you did?
Yeah, we had 6 people on Electro Wireless, CAS 11s. That was pretty much the most. Sometimes we would have more. And when they had the reveal day, we might have 10 or 11 people on wire. And at that point, Todd would take a certain group and I would take a certain group. And we'd sort of divvy up our mics that way. And then we had, of course, booms as well. But capturing the audio primarily on the lav mics. The booms were, more for reality mode as a backup if, we have an issue with somebody's lav. We're going to get the boom in there. Just because we had so many cameras shooting and wide and tight and that whole situation. And so that's pretty much how we did it.
Okay. Now, regarding time code, was the whole crew on the same matching time code, or did you have a separate time code for each, basically?
No, we would always start together, and most of the time we were together as far as 2 sound mixers and 2 or 3 camera people, and then some other devices as well. We had a lot of DSLRs, GoPros. We had, stuff set up for if they're in the car or if they're in the boat and they take off without us. We'd have, DSLRs mounted. I'd have to do a bag drop into the boat or into the car. So we had time code slates as well. We would just pick one mixer as the master. My mixer was the master. I would jam Todd's mixer. He would jam the locket boxes for his camera B, and then the other cameras he might be working with. And I would do the same for camera A and the cameras I might be working with. The slate, we had one slate. Actually, I take that back. We had 2 slates. He had a slate as well, Todd, for when he had to break away. And so we would slate any device that couldn't take time code, just so it had that universal time code. And that worked out, as far as I know, really well for post.
All right. Well, there was another show, which I've watched quite a bit myself, called Food Paradise, which sounds exciting. So tell us a little bit about that one.
Food Paradise, as well as Flipping Ships, were both produced by the same production company. And a sound mixer named Rick Brush actually introduced me to them. And so Rick Brush was the main mixer for Food Paradise for many, many years. And so I took over Flipping Ships because Rick was doing Food Paradise. When Flipping Ships ended, I started doing some Food Paradise as well when they needed additional mixers to send wherever across the country. And so I do a run here and there for that show. That's a very simple and straightforward setup. One mixer, 2 cameras. They showed on F55s and, time code. Not really a slate very much in that show, just locket boxes on the cameras, a scratch audio hop on each camera, and then up to really just 4 wireless at a time. You'd shoot a big portion of the show is the chef in the kitchen demoing whatever the food is for that particular restaurant that you're talking about. That challenges kitchen noise and chef coats. And so I started using Hide-A-Mic on that show, and boy, that was just amazing. Those things are great on chef coats. It was a real clothing noise eliminator for those. I'm so happy that those were invented at that time. And so I really enjoyed those. Before that, if I had a really bad chef coat, I would probably do like the little B6 trick through the buttonhole or something. But I'm not as big a fan of a B6 mic as I am of a CAS 11. So being able to use the CAS 11s and the Hide-A-Mic on those chef coats was great. Certainly great help. But of course, the big challenge is a lot of times you had to leave kitchen fans on in that show because they're cooking and there's fire issues and they need to be able, or just you'd smoke out your kitchen and you wouldn't be able to shoot anything. And so that's always noisy. And it was just like trying to make the environment as less noisy as possible, but never pristine, never pristine. And then the second half of your day is filming people eating the food and getting their reactions. So that part of the day moves really quickly because you're going boom, boom, boom from, couple people or a group of 4 people, and then you're miking, demiking, moving on to the next group, getting their reactions to the food, and you've got to do that with you got to get 6 good ones in the can. That's the most challenging part of the day, but really a very straightforward show to do.
Now, do you get to eat any of the food? Is there time for that?
Yes. Sometimes no, depending on your shooting schedule, but most of the time, yeah. And oddly enough, on that show, you would rarely eat their food for lunch. Later, they started being able to do that more, but because of your schedule and needing to film them cooking the dish that you're making for the show, they couldn't cook your lunch. And so they'd have to go out somewhere else and get lunch. And a lot of times it paled in comparison to what you were filming. But yeah, there was always extra food around, and you could certainly sample of the food that they were making there. And so, that was a good thing and a bad thing too, because you ate a lot on that show.
Yeah, I can imagine. That would be the benefit, I think.
Yes, as long as you don't eat too much, it's perfect.
Well, there was another show you had talked about it was called Blue Sky Metropolis. So tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, that was a great show to work on. That is a documentary series for PBS produced by Peter Jones Productions. Peter Jones Productions, great people. Peter Jones, great director and producer. He won an Emmy for his documentary on Johnny Carson. And I met up with them after they had already produced that. They were doing a couple different things. And then eventually I worked with them on a show called Angelino, which was another PBS show. But I don't know if that show was syndicated nationally. I think it just was locally, actually. But it profiled different people who live in Southern California. And that was a terrific show to work on. I was able on that show to capture what we were shooting on camera and also collect a lot of natural sounds from the environment wherever we were shooting and give those to post as well to sweeten just this person's story and sort of like try to capture their story from an audio point of view by capturing more than just whatever they were talking about. And that was a lot of fun. So a lot of times we'd be shooting and I would sort of fade away into the background to capture some natural sounds of the environment we were in while still taking in their lav mics if we're on location or their boom mics if they're sitting down somewhere. I mean, sometimes literally I would step outside while I had my boom on a wireless and wireless lav on them and capturing that sound and then I'd kind of capture the sound of the neighborhood around them. So that was a great experience and it led to Blue Sky Metropolis. And Blue Sky Metropolis was a documentary, a 4-part series on the history of aerospace in Southern California, which has huge heritage, especially with the Apollo moon landing and even the space shuttle. And that show, most of what we shot was on a stage, and they were interviews with engineers and scientists. And what I wanted to do for that show is not have to lav anybody up because there's that old tradition of, well, we're going to interview someone and we're going to set up a boom and put a lav on them. The lav is the backup, or I don't know, the boom is the backup. I'm not sure what they're thinking with that. But as we approached that show, I thought, it would really be great if we really want a backup mic, if that second backup mic was a boom mic, because there's just a huge difference between, a $1,200 mic or $2,000 mic and a $300 mic. And on the first day, I showed Peter what I had set up for it, and I was just hoping he would say like, "Okay, yes," because sometimes producers you try something different and you just don't know how they're going to react. And when he saw it, he loved it. He's like, "Oh, this is perfect. I don't want to put a lav on them because that's just going to make them uncomfortable. And these people aren't used to being on camera, and I just want them to be comfortable." So he loved it. We were on a stage. Everybody was super on board with quieting down the stage. And I had above them my Shep Cement, and then I put the MKH50 above them as well, the Sennheiser, sort of thinking like, well, this will be, they're slightly different perspective. They have a different sound, each of them, and this will give post 2 choices. I ended up being able to get my mics in so close on every interview that they sounded virtually the same. I mean, it sounded like radio. The mics were just so close on these people. And so that was my setup for the studio. When we went in the field, it was more traditional where I'm wiring people up and running a boom as well. But again, sort of approaching that situation like I did for Angelino, where I'm trying to capture what they're saying on the lavs, and then I'm capturing the sounds of our environment that we're in on my boom at the same time for sort of a scratch audio track for post.
But you'll have to check out that show. It looks like some really interesting content there.
It was great content. And I, personally love the history of aerospace and the space program. And so it was really a dream job in many ways. And just to see that perspective from the engineers who, were sort of on the front lines of building all these machines, and sending people into space. It's not from the point of view of the astronauts, which is usually the way those stories are told, but it's the point of view from, the aerospace companies and the people, that were in charge of, sending men into space and then to the moon and then, in the space shuttle and building the space station. This was really a unique perspective and a great series to work on. I think it's syndicated nationally, and you can also find it on the PBS app if you are a subscriber of that. It got out there pretty well. It was really pretty well received.
All right. There's another one called Back Home with the Bradys, and I grew up watching the Brady Bunch. So tell us a little bit about that production.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Myself as well. I mean, I think most people grew up watching the Brady Bunch reruns, in the afternoon after school as a kid. And that was a great show to work on as well. I mean, we've all grown up with the Brady Bunch, it seems like, pretty much everybody. And, for someone to say, yeah, you're going to go hang out with each of the Brady kids in their home, and see how they live and what their house is like. And right there, it's kind of like, okay, you had me at Brady, And that was a web series, actually. So it was shot in conjunction with the Brady Bunch HGTV, Brady House show that they were doing. And so it came out, I think, slightly before to sort of promote, the show that would be coming on HGTV. And so that's what we did. I worked on 4 of the episodes, worked with 4 of the Bradys and, went to their homes. And, we hung out with them and they would, do some fun stuff with our host and show them, where they live and maybe, profile something, that they were interested in personally. Like Maureen McCormick was really into quilting. And so we did a little quilting trip with her and where she goes and does that. And Susan Olsen was very into animal rescue. And so we went to a place that she supports that's animal rescue and hung out with her and all these crazy animals they had there. Barry Williams, we went to his house in Branson, Missouri, and we had fun there. And when we got there, there was a lot of weather issues. And so we kind of had to change a little bit, I think, what the plan was. We were going to go out on the water with him, but it wasn't, we weren't able to do that. But he did share a lot of the wardrobe he has, including the Johnny Bravo outfit. And that was a lot of fun to film that stuff and to hang out with him. And Christopher Knight also was real nice. He was here in Southern California. And he was into woodworking and redoing a portion of his house, the floor in his house. And so that's what we did with him that day. He was experimenting with some different stuff. And also he's a great cook. And so he cooked for our host and made a really nice meal. It was almost like back into food paradise mode for part of that one.
Pretty standard setup when it comes to miking. Any particular challenges you had to deal with?
Oh, that show was a really simple and straightforward setup. It was basically just, lobbing the talent and having your boom there, to capture all the other elements that you might need to capture. It's just a straight E&G, pretty basic setup. 2 camera. I don't think I had hops on cameras. I think we just had camera mics and time code on cameras. And I did all the audio in my rig. And that was all done on my small rig, the 63 rig, which was more than enough for that show.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about how you kind of got started in production sound.
Well, I started in 1992, so that's 27 years. And I kind of fell into it. I went to film school, and after I graduated film school, I started working at a documentary company as a camera assistant. They had just switched from film to video. This is actually 1990. So I was really more like a camera PA than a camera assistant because it was very pretty straightforward and simple setup. But I learned a little bit about sound there from a couple people that did sound for that company. And I probably thought I knew a lot more about it than I did. And when that company went under, one of them suggested, well, you should go to this company in town. At that time, there were a lot of companies in Los Angeles that would send out crews to various television shows for freelance day work basically. And there were several of these crewing companies that owned all the gear, so you'd show up there, you'd take their gear and you'd go work on a different show just about every day. A lot of MTV stuff back then, a lot of tabloid news shows. And there was just a lot of shows that were all serviced that way from those companies. And so I went to this one called Gold Coast at the time. It's no longer in business. And I told them, I'm a camera assistant. And they said, well, what's your rate? And I said, well, where I'm working now, I get $200 a day. And at the time, for me, right out of film school, it was a lot of money. I was making a lot of money and I was pretty happy about that. I felt like, Jim Rockford or something, $200 a day plus expenses. And they looked at me and they're like, oh, we could never pay our camera assistants that. That's way too much. But if you want to do sound, we could do that. And they really sort of didn't ask me if I could do sound, just like, do you want to do it? And, they probably said like, well, have you ever done that? And I'm like, oh, I've done a little bit. So they started hiring me as a sound person and I'd go out and do sound. And I learned very quickly. I really didn't know as much as I thought I did. But for some reason they were willing to, still send me out, and they might send me on a multi-camera shoot where I'm working with another sound mixer. And basically the reason was they were paying me $50 less than they were paying all their sound people. So they were more than happy to send me out and save that money and sort of do on-the-job training. And that's basically what it did. And from there I started working for some other companies in town that did that kind of work. And for many years, I worked as a sound person and without owning any gear whatsoever. Since I went to film school, all this time I was pursuing a career in screenwriting. And so I kind of looked at sound as my day job, and I'm going to, keep writing. And then when I start selling scripts, I'll stop doing sound. After many years of that, I became really good doing sound. And I had a business at that time that just pretty much ran itself. People would just call me and I'd go to work, and I did more and more sound and I wrote less and less and less. And at a certain point I realized, if I really put some effort into this, I could probably have a really good business. And I just got tired of pursuing the screenwriting. I had some fun adventures with it, but I never sold anything. In 2009, I made the plunge to just really, really dive into sound and really expand myself as a sound person. I bought gear. I did tons of research and self-education to do more and more elaborate projects and work with more elaborate equipment. And my business just grew from there. It worked out really well.
Did you have any mentors along the way?
There were a lot of people I worked with that were very helpful, very welcoming and instructive. I don't know that I had one person that I would think of as a mentor or a traditional mentor relationship, but certainly over the years, a lot of people have, taught me a lot of different things. And, in that time in 2009, when I really decided that, I'm going to really become, more than just the guy that comes in and uses somebody else's equipment and gets the job done, but really someone that, has a extended knowledge of what we do and the tools that we do it with. And I spent a lot of time educating myself, a lot of reading, a lot of talking, with different individuals, and a lot of, at the time, social media, of course, was great for that because there's a lot of great, Facebook pages and JW Sound and just great places to get that education. And I have continued with that since then. And I do try to really stay up on top of trends and what's going on in the business, what people are doing and the type of work that I do and other types of work as well. And that's just sort of been, how I approach my career is that, you're always learning. You're always finding new things and new ways to do the same old things, even better.
Now, you also have a family, so how do you handle the work and personal life balance?
Yeah, that's a challenge for sure. I would say, I've kind of made a lot of choices based around having a family. And those kind of choices have an impact on the type of work you do and the type of career you have. So in the 90s, when I was working, I was asked by a camera person to work with them on a show that we had both been shooting for as freelancers. He said, I think they're going to hire me on staff. Would you work with me on staff? And so that was a news magazine show, like when Dateline was just starting out. Fox was actually starting a news magazine, not not Fox News, because there was no Fox News channel then. Just a news magazine that would be on the regular Fox network, and it was showed just like Dateline. It didn't have a political bent one way or the other. It was just a news magazine show, and we went around the country covering different stories, just like you would for Dateline or 60 Minutes or any other news magazine at that time. And I worked on that show for a year. And then during that time, my wife became pregnant with our sons. We have twin boys. And I didn't want to be traveling all the time during that. My wife was pregnant. That show ended. That cameraman moved on to Dateline, and I followed him and did Dateline briefly with him. But that is such a unpredictable life doing that type of work. You could be, somewhere away from home, getting ready to jump on a plane later that day to go home, and you get the call like, "Oh, nope, we're going to send you to Washington. This story is breaking there. You need to go do that." And that's the news lifestyle. And I realized that really wasn't going to be compatible with us having twin boys, because I needed to be around for that. So I stopped doing news altogether, and I started pursuing work in town here. And I've pretty much stayed in that mode ever since. I haven't gone back to doing news, and I do everything is entertainment related, whether it's for an entertainment show here, or whether it's for a commercial project here, or a documentary project here, or a series that's based out of here, or behind the scenes and EPK, which I've done a lot in my career as well. Everything's sort of based out of here, and I wasn't traveling on the road. I still travel quite a bit, but I was always back here quite a bit as well. And even that is difficult, even that amount of travel, it's difficult when you have a family. And it is a tough balance. You really have to take it into consideration. The most important thing is you just have to be there. And although I didn't stop traveling, I was able to spend long periods here at home. And so, really, it just comes down to, you have to be around, to be part of your family. And so even though I still travel, I'm not traveling constantly. And so I'm here, and, you just have to be here. And that's worked out very well for our family. My wife and I have 27 years of marriage, and we have two wonderful twin boys that are 22, and we have a very close family.
Oh, that's great. So I usually ask, what's your worst on-set experience? But it could be the most challenging experience.
A year or two ago, I actually was doing a show about the Grand Canyon with Orlando Jones. And at one point, we knew that we were going to have to follow him as he went on burros with a tour guide and a whole tour group into the Grand Canyon, on that classic burro ride down the wall of the Grand Canyon into the bottom. And we knew that we weren't going to be on horseback, neither the cameraman or myself. Great cameraman Matt Gully was going to be out in front of them, sometimes quite far in front. And I was going to be behind. Traditional E&G audio, we're always the caboose. So it would be him, this parade of people on burros, and then myself, sometimes quite far away, because if he was shooting some kind of a wide shot, I had to always make sure I wasn't in the shot. So, my first thought was like, well, okay, I'll put, wireless on them, and then I'll put the PDR recorders as well that Electrosonics makes. And we'll probably, I told production, once I get far away, you're probably going to have to just use those recorders, but their time code sync and everything, and we'll go from there. But what I did with my bag, my actual small bag, the 633, is I put a short antenna mast, maybe like 5 feet or 6 feet tall, with my RF venue antenna on the top, which is the batwing antenna with the little whips on the sides. And I hooked that directly to my SRB in my bag. And then as they got far away, I raised that mast all the way up. And I thought, well, I'll be able to capture them at certain points. And then, they'll have the PDR recordings for the rest of it. But it ended up actually, I guess, because we were in that canyon and because the frequency we were using just happened to be really great for that area, that I captured pretty much all of it on my bag when I was really quite far away. I would say maybe almost a quarter mile away at times. Surprisingly, I guess the canyon walls really helped. And the more we hiked and the deeper we went in, of course, I guess created more blockage for any extraneous RF, if there was any, that was going to interfere with us. And although we had all the recordings on the PDR, we ended up being able to really use pretty much primarily the recordings I made on my 633.
I guess you're hiking. Was that a long hike?
It wasn't super long, no. I mean, the whole hike, I don't know. I'm really a bad judge of those things. Maybe we didn't go all the way. We didn't need to. The whole thing, I don't know, lasted an hour, hour and a half. That's going down and coming back. And, so we didn't really hike that far. And they would stop at certain points and do some scripted things. Besides him interviewing the leader of the tour, he was doing throws to cameras and some stand-ups as well. So there were times where we stopped and started. It wasn't too bad. They always sort of like bill it like, I just want you to know we're going to be hiking into the canyon. It could be a long hike. Are you okay with that? And I'm always game for that kind of stuff. But it really was not anywhere what we thought it would be when they first told us what we were doing.
Oh, man. Now, did you ever have any situations where like you had equipment failure or you lost files or files got corrupt or anything like that?
I've only had really one instance where I lost just a portion of a file. I feel very lucky in that regard because I know that's probably not everyone's experience, but I was recording actually a script read for the movie Oblivion, the Tom Cruise movie. And there was a lot of actors all around the table, not the actors from the movie, except for Tom Cruise. He was reading his part. And they had a bunch of other actors, and they were going to use that reading to cut with the storyboards that they created for the movie. So it was a big deal. I set up a lot of mics, and I was using actually my 744 at that time and a mixer, and I mixed some of the mics to one channel on the 744, and I had Tom Cruise on a separate channel. And right near the beginning, my 744 displays a message on the screen that I'd never seen before. It was something like, offline. And they're reading the script and I'm seeing that and I'm like, oh my God, this is not the job to have a problem with my recorder. But then it corrected itself and went back to normal. So I'm like, okay, I guess everything's okay. Certainly hope so. But it was a problem with the hard drive. That ended up, I didn't lose anything. And I had the CF card going as well. But because the hard drive blooped, I did miss the portion of just one line of dialogue that Tom Cruise was saying at the time. So, I went back and checked it and I realized that. And I told production and they're like, it's not a big deal. He's going to be in here a million times. We can have him record that line again. But boy, I was sweating bullets when that happened. That was the one and only time that I had something like that happen.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it's interesting. Every now and then we have these little things and you get a message and you're like, I have never seen that before. Or, you go to roll yeah. And it's like, error, card error or no card. And I'm thinking there's a card, you pop the card, you put it back in and it's fine. But it is odd.
Yeah. It is a little disconcerting when you're like, I have never seen that message before and I don't know what it is, but it can't be good.
That's good.
I mean, just another facet of things I do are a lot of talk and entertainment shows. So segments for talk shows, maybe. Recently, I've done some stuff for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. So that's like in the field, skits or bits to camera. And I've done that for a variety of different shows over the years. I used to do a lot of stuff like that for Steve Harvey's show when it was based at Universal. And it was based in Chicago, too. Some of their longer segments. And did a really fun segment with Steve Harvey and Jack Black at Universal when they took over one of the tram tours there.
It was just an unscripted kind of thing. They were just having fun.
Yeah, basically unscripted. The premise was they were going to have them stop a tram. Of course, the studio and everybody knew what was coming. The only people that didn't know what was coming were the actual guests on the tram. And so they had one point in the tour where they were going to drive up in their golf cart, wave to the tram, talk to them, and then get out of the golf cart and actually take over the tour. And we had headsets there for them that they could put on. And then they took over the tram for a bit. And one of the big parts of it was when they go through Earthquake on the backlot tour. That was a lot of fun. They had a lot of Jack Black and Steve Harvey together were really quite funny on that. And that was a challenge too, because Universal is a super, wireless heavy frequency lot. There is a lot of wireless going on there, both for the movies and TV shows that film there, and then a ton for the tour as well. And so there's a lot of levels of clearing frequencies through them and a lot of figure crossing, like, I hope this works when on the day. And fortunately, everything went to plan.
Now, just a traditional, probably a lav on each one?
I had a lav on each one, and then I had a boom, and I would jump in there and boom different things or get reactions from people on the tour. I think I might have had a plant mic as well and a lav on the tour guide as well, because he ended up speaking a little bit, and we knew that was going to happen. And so I think I had a wire on him as well, and I might have had a plant mic in their golf cart as well, just as a backup, thinking like, if there's a problem with wireless frequency on Talent, I have that as well.
Okay. Speaking of wiring up Talent, do you have expendables that you like to use on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I have probably a lot of what a lot of people use. I use Hydamic a lot. I find them to be a great clothing noise solver. And I recently used their little silicone sticky pads with them, which are also quite nice. They're very, very small and very, very sticky. They stay on really well. And then use, the moleskin sandwich is another, tried and true method. Once in a while, I might use those special vampires for CAS 11s. There's situations like if someone's going to sweat a lot, I might use that. Or I've even taken those little tiny safety pins and taped them to the CAS 11. And you can pin them, especially if they're wearing a T-shirt, right in that collar area there. And that's really good if you know in advance that if you use sticky that they're going to sweat it off. Mepitac tape, transport tape. So I use Stick It over Top Stick. I use Top Stick if I have to, but I really find Stick It to be my personal preference as more sticky.
Well, if you could go back and change some things, what would you do different?
I would have bought equipment much earlier in my career. Because I was pursuing the screenwriting, I was really, not focusing enough on growing the audio business. It was, in the 90s, I used to say, and all the way up till about 2008, I would say, look, my business is recession proof. It has never been affected by the economy one way or the other. People just kept calling, the work just kept coming in. When we had the Great Recession, that definitely changed. The industry changed quite a bit. And that's when I realized I really need to take this business that's just been sort of self-working and put a little effort into it and really make it work. And a big part of that, of course, is owning audio equipment. You definitely become a different entity when you're an owner-operator as opposed to just an operator. And you're perceived differently by all departments in production. And rightly so, because, you are making that step into committing yourself to a level of expertise that comes with owning your own equipment and making sure you are using the latest and the greatest and keeping up with the technology as it changes. And now in our business, it's changing faster than it ever has. There were several points early in my career where I thought about buying a little E&G package and putting it together. And at that time, there was not a lot of really powerful tools that were also low cost like there is today. So it was always a big hurdle for me. But I should have just started small, buying something here, buying something there. I always felt like, well, I got to buy the whole package at once, which really is not the case at all. Had I done that many years ago, I would have been much better positioned today. I feel like sometimes I'm playing catch up because I've started so late in my career, even though it's 10 years ago now, in putting together audio equipment. I think if I really sit back and look, I'm definitely caught up now. But for many years, I did feel that pain. The first recorder I bought was a 744T, and I used that with a PSC Alpha Mix. And both of those, they didn't even make the Alpha Mix anymore when I bought it. And the 744 was still out there and made, but the 788 was really the big deal then. But I didn't have the money. So I had a friend who had a 744 and upgraded, and he sold it to me, Mike Baum, a great audio mixer. He sold me that 744 and allowed me to make payments on it. And I bought that, and then I bought some stuff from a local audio dealer here, Location Sound. I bought the Alpha Mix and a few other things, and started buying wireless here and there. And I was on my way then. Just having that ability to take jobs where you're also renting your gear onto the job and having that peace of mind of knowing that your equipment inside out and can quickly adapt or change is just a big asset to any sound mixer, and the two especially an E&G sound mixer where sometimes you're showing up at work and you just got to jump out of the van and get going right on the fly. And then, like I said, your perception as someone who takes their work seriously is upped considerably when, you're an owner as well as an operator. So that's the one thing I wish I had done looking back. And now, maybe some people would disagree, but I feel it's really easy to jump in now. There are a lot of, inexpensive recorders that are incredibly powerful. The whole sound devices mixed pre-line comparatively are just very inexpensive yet very powerful tools. You can jump in as an owner operator, and as you become more and more successful with those, you can upgrade those tools to a 6 series, a 688 or a 633, and now they have the 8 series, and you can move on to that later. The same thing with wireless too. You can jump in with some Sennheiser G4 now. You can jump in with some of those, and those are relatively low cost, and then you can upgrade those as you go along. But they are, for the price, remarkably powerful, and they do really offer someone who's starting out, and knows they want to do this as their career, a low cost alternative to sort of jump in and have some of your own gear and start moving yourself down that road. So that would be one thing. The other thing I do regret is I've been an IA 695 for 10 years, and I really wish I had joined that much earlier. As you continue your career and start to look at things, like the importance of really good medical and really good retirement, there's really no comparing those benefits through IATSE. So I wish I joined them much sooner.
All right. Well, if you could give one word of advice to people new to working in sound, what would you tell them?
There are so many great resources now for people who want to start in sound that were never there when I was starting out. I was very fortunate in my career. I was, I guess, pleasant enough to work with that people overlooked my inexperience early on as a sound person. I'm going to digress a little, but then I'm going to come back. A lot of people in our work come from a music background. And I think that is just such a fabulous background to have. Unfortunately, that is not mine at all. I did not come into audio with any kind of other audio experience or knowledge. I have no musical background whatsoever, but having been lucky enough to, I guess, be pleasant enough to work with and willing to learn early on in my career that, a lot of people kept calling me back to do work. And I learned from other sound people that I worked with how to do everything. And that's still, a fantastic way to learn, of course. But now there are so many other ways. There's so many opportunities to learn about this work through social media, through an abundance of resources, magazines and books and all kinds of stuff that just didn't exist. Websites like Video Mantis, lynda.com, all these resources that just weren't around when I was starting out. So if you want to learn about sound, definitely find ways to go out and do it, and hopefully work with people who do it that are willing to share their knowledge with you. But also, do the work on your own, because there are so many resources out there that you can just seek out on your own and explore and learn a tremendous amount of information from. When I was at that point I talked about earlier where I decided to really commit to working in sound, there was some social media. There certainly was JW Sound, but there weren't like all the Facebook pages that there are today where you can find so much information about the work we do. There were a couple of great magazines There was, of course, the 695 Quarterly, and there still is. There was a magazine called the Coffee Files that used to be produced by a local rental house called Coffee Sound that's no longer in business. They were actually absorbed into True Audio. And there was also the CAS, and there still is, the CAS Quarterly. And, I would just try to find any copies of those magazines I could. I wasn't a member of CAS at first, and I wasn't a member of 695 at first, but there were different events where maybe they had some back issues out, and man, I would take every one of them, or I'd go into Coffee Sound, and they had a rack of free magazines, and man, I would grab, a half dozen of them at a time. And I read those things cover to cover, and I had highlighters and pens, and I highlighted information and I underlined it just like I was in a class. And my advice would be, you need to approach it in that regard, like, really do the work to educate yourself. And of course, seek out others that are willing to help you as well. And there's just a lot of resources for both of that now that, it makes even, doing that much easier than back when I had to do it.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, Paul, as we kind of start to wrap things up, this has been great, but how can people best get in touch with you?
You know what? You can visit my Instagram and then, of course, on my website at buscemiarts.com. It's my last name, Buscemi. It's spelled just like Steve Buscemi, the actor, Buscemi, and then the word arts, ARTS after that, all one word, at Buscemi Arts. So that's my Instagram, and buscemiarts.com is my website.
All right. I want to say thanks to Paul Buscemi for being on the show today.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. I appreciate the invite. It's been fun, and I like your show. I've listened to your show many times, and as we've talked about all the numerous educational sources, your show is a perfect example. I don't know of any other podcast, really, that delves into production sound like yours does. And so if people want to learn about it, man, obviously they're in the right place because you've had some great guests here. It's a great resource for anyone who wants to learn about sound.
And I'd like to say thanks to everyone for listening. If you have questions or would like us to discuss a particular topic, email us at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.